until that time, at very near, quite close to Saffron Walden, where they had been virtually since the division was brought home from North Africa in November 1943. And we as a battalion, we were in a tented camp along the South End, the London South End main road at that time, at a village called East Horndon. And there was absolute lines of sort of bell tents full of troops waiting to go somewhere. Now I always remember on Saturday, the 3rd of June, 1944, we were told we were moving. We didn't know where. And as we were driven through Tilbury town, I always remember Saturday afternoon, all the people in the shops came out to wave us goodbye. You know, we didn't know where we were going, they didn't know either. And we embarked on a troop transporter in Tilbury, and then sat. The boat then went out and anchored off at the end of Southend Pier, very close. And there we sat for 3 days before we moved. We didn't know anything about a cancellation. There'd been a cancellation. And we actually went through the Straits of Dover on D-Day itself.
And were you Juno or Gold? Which beach were you? Which beach?
Oh, we landed on Juno.
Juno.
There was a sort of Piccadilly Circus, but it must have been about 10 or 15 miles south of the Isle of Wight, where I think we did harbour for about 18 hours, because we didn't get off our troop transporter until the 7th of June, which is the day after D-Day.
It's the 3rd today, you know.
Yeah.
So 75 years to the day that you were at Tilbury Docks.
That's right. Yes, it was Tilbury Docks. Yes.
But Juno was relatively okay, wasn't it, as a landing?
Juno, yes. We got up. We were taken off the troop transporter, and we had all our heavy equipment on, and we were then put on a landing craft infantry. And I always remember the skipper saying, "Well, I can't take you all into the shore. I'll have to halt, because I've got to turn around and bring in more troops in." So he said, "I'll have to halt about 400 yards away from the beach." And I think we had been issued with waders and a life jacket, and of course we had our heavy equipment on, and water was, I suppose most of us, roughly up to our waist. But with the people of the Pioneer Corps being on hand to pull the small people out, and of which we had always a large number in the Scottish regiment, because they were rather trying to be small people, and they were on hand. But we landed without any casualties, gone to the beach at Courcelles-sur-Mer. And I looked back and I thought, God, look at all this shipping. I haven't seen anything like this since the Naval Review at Spithead in George V in 1935 as a schoolboy at Milford-on-Sea. And they all seemed reasonably peaceful, except one battleship, the Nelson, bombarding the shore, moving slowly up and down, coming back again, letting off an enormous great round of ammunition inland. Whether they were known targets, I don't know. But we landed, and we got off without any casualties. In fact, we marched inland to spend our first night about a mile and a half, I would think, from the beach. at Courcelles-sur-Mer. And I do remember German aircraft coming by day, and they were soon quickly seen off by Spitfires or Hurricanes, who of course could only spend about 10 minutes, I think, over the land before they had to beetle back to go and get more, otherwise they'd run out of fuel. They could just do that until we'd had occupied more land, so they could have a sort of
an airstrip. Yeah.
Yes.
So where did you have first active combat?
Set piece attack. Rarely the first one that we had, wasn't quite the first casualties, was we were moved to the other side of the River Orne, which they always made rock, song and dance of, which of course the parachute regiment, the 6th Airborne Division, had captured. And the Germans didn't want us to get to the other side, so the east side of the River Orne. Anyway, we crossed there, and we had our first attack down towards Caen, to a village called Saint-André-en-la-Chaux-de-Lorette.
I think I've got a map.
I don't think that probably mentions Saint-André and...
The River Orne is definitely mentioned.
Right. The River Orne, yes. It was a sort of barrier, really.
The maps are not terribly good in this book.
No.
Too many arrows.
That's right. No, not terribly good. I rather agree with you. You had a private camera. You couldn't get by film. It's like a sort of thing like, can I get extra butter or something, or sugar? Because really these photographs that appear, well, even the official photographers were limited how much film they could use. But film was a difficult thing to manufacture, I don't know. I often wonder, the same old pictures come up almost every anniversary.
Montgomery's sense of humour.
Monty sent a signal. He loved tackling with the War Office. He'd never served in the place until 1947, when he was Chief of the Imperial General Staff, as they called it. And he sent a signal to the War Office and said, situation very serious out here, and this time we won't be able to come back through Dunkirk, because we hadn't taken Dunkirk, because we thought if we did, we'd kill a lot of the French. I thought, typical Monty. He loved having a dig at the War Office, because he had a great ally in Ellenbrook. Ellenbrook was a man, I think, has really not been, perhaps, what's the word, realised. People didn't realise what a tremendous man he was.
Yes. Well, I think when his diaries were published,
yes,
I think there was a lot of recognition of how much pressure he absorbed,
yes,
both of Churchill and how much he protected Montgomery.
Yes, yes.
But going back to, I want to talk about Dick O'Connor, but not quite yet. But going back to the last conversation we had, which was actually on the D+1 anniversary of D-Day, which was in June when I was here.
Yes.
And I said, do you realise it's D+1? And you told me about landing and how they had the support troops who were taller than the Highlanders, who were all small, and getting them off.
True, getting them out of the water. They had the members of the Pioneer Corps being there to pull them out, because they're rather small men, really.
Yes, and that was the 51st.
That's right.
And you were a captain?
No.
You were?
Private soldier.
You were a private soldier?
Because I'd been rejected twice at these War Office selection boards. I think that, and to be honest, I rather told them what I thought about these selection board. I remember a question they asked me was, well, what are your uppermost thoughts in your mind? And I said, well, a relook at whether you select your potential officers, because they got back. Oh God, no, we're not going to have this chap criticising. And funny enough, the only man who I read who agreed with the selection procedure was one Bernard Ferguson, who I came to know very well. He was the man who made his name in the jungles of Burma. And he wrote in his own autobiography, he said, I was invited to go to one of the War Office Selection Board selection, and all he said was, I thought the system was rotten. Bit unfair.
So you were in which company were you in?
I started off in B Company. We didn't have a great respect for the company commander. He was a bit like that. He was found out, of course, and was actually sent home. But I wasn't with them very long in the company. And then I was posted. They said, come on, you can do better than this. We'll send you to the battalion intelligence section. Which I started off as a Bren gunner in a rifle company. Then I was sent to the...
so you landed with your Bren gun?
Yes.
And on D+1?
Yes.
And then your first contact as an infantryman,
yes,
was where?
It was, I suppose, only about 2 miles away from inland, from the invasion beaches, where we had our first sort of conflict, really, against the Germans. And, do you know, one of the things that I've never forgotten was, one always heard in storybooks about people running away, and I was absolutely astonished. I couldn't believe my eyes. There were people in front of us who came running back. And I think somebody, then fortunately, I remember a very young officer in our regiment who was in a reserve company, came forward and said, come on, follow me. Very good chap. Sadly, he was killed himself. He was a sniper officer, only a few weeks later. But I thought, well, this is it. Why aren't our NCOs doing something about this, rallying people? But I never thought to actually see people running. It was really terrible, in a way. It's the sort of thing that's not publicised. And I remember, actually, another thing. By this time, I'd been posted to the battalion intelligence section. I was down at battalion headquarters, and...
Which was where?
In a village called... I'll get it in a minute. It wasn't Saint-Henri. That was the one we had to capture. It was called... Oh, God.
Well, let's not worry about it. Anyway, yeah. You'll remember.
If we come back, after, of course, after...
So you were in the battalion headquarters?
Yes. And there was a sort of... I shouldn't have, of course, been listening in, but I was. Between the battalion commander of the Cameron Highlanders, who were in our brigade, and the brigade commander. And the battalion commander of the Camerons had been told to go forward and capture this village of Saint-Henri. And he said, yes, I must have tanks. And the brigade commander, who was a man called Brigadier Hoch, H-A-U-G-H, said, well, no, I'm sorry, there aren't any. They haven't been brought ashore yet. Oh, well, the brigade commander was saying, well, you do as you're told, which he accepted. Anyway, the battalion of the Camerons went forward. They did suffer a lot of casualties. They didn't get their final objective. But they did lose about 100 men, most of them wounded. And as a result of this dispute he had with his brigade commander, they were both actually relieved of their command and sent home, which is a pretty awful thing to happen.
Yes.
I've just finished reading a very new book, which has been written by a man called Sir Malcolm Pill, unusual name, who's a retired judge, not a high court, I think a high court judge, and he's retired, and he said, I took an open degree in military history, and obviously a pretty good degree he must have got, because he'd written this book really particularly about the generals who succeeded and those who didn't in those Normandy days.
Oh, I must read it.
Yes.
But if I take you back to your battalion headquarters, where you were then an intelligence...
Yes.
Were you still a private at that point, or did you...
Yes, I was. I was made a corporal later and commanded a section, and my commanding officer said, no first name terms then, of course, there's a corporal.
Yeah.
Nairne, would you like to go before a War Office selection board? They've just opened a board in Belgium. And I said, yes, I would. And I went there and I thought, well, why weren't the other boards like this? This was very gentlemanly, and a very nice commandant and assistant commandant. And they interviewed me. And I said, I'm ready to go and take command of a platoon now. And the commandant, which was pretty conceited on my part, and he said, well, you've been a section commander, but he said, I'm not allowed to give immediate commissions, sorry. Anyway, the war will be over in about a couple of months.
And when was this?
And said, you'll probably get killed if you go, if I send you back. He said, I'm going to send you back to England. You can go to an octu there, which I did. I went to the one run by the Brigade of Guards.
And which month was this?
This was... I was sent back, literally, about 6 weeks before the European, before VE Day, really, yes. And I went back straight away. I went to the Octu. I was a bit frightened of it, going to it. It was the one that was based on Aldershot, and it was full of Guards cadets. However, they came soon after I joined there. I always remember this. Anybody qualifying for a medal? I said, yes. Well, go down and see the quartermaster. I was entitled to 3 medals. And when I came back, people said, my God, he's seen action, I was rather a sort of favoured pupil at the Octu. I enjoyed the course, actually. I thought it was well run, as one would expect, really, by the Brigade of Guards.
Yes, I'm sure. But as a corporal, as in the intelligence unit, what was your main sort of duty? What was your...
Probably looking after the maps and seeing all the company commanders got their right maps. This was before I went off to be a section commander in a rifle company.
And that was
as a corporal.
And you were in France at that stage, still fighting?
No, we were just arrived.
So
we were actually in Holland.
So the Falaise action had taken place, the German army had retreated, and you had advanced to Holland.
I think I got my recommendation because, I shouldn't really tell you this, but I did bring a man in under fire in those battles in the Reichswald forest, the battles that took place between the Meuse and the Rhine, which was a lot of casualties were suffered there.
You brought a man in under fire?
Yes.
What, a wounded man?
Yeah.
So you had to go forward?
I went forward. I saw him drop. And when I got to him, I thought, God, I can lift him a short way. I did lift him a short way. And I then said, must get a stretcher bearer to move him further back. I can't carry him back further. So that was that.
And how far away were the enemy?
Oh, I think probably not more than about 400 yards at that moment.
And what were they hitting you with at the time? Was it under machine gun fire, or was it artillery, or
artillery?
Did they have those nebelwerfer rockets?
They did have them. I didn't use them there. I don't remember them there. I think the Germans got a bit of a fright from our tanks. What do they call them?
The Shermans?
Yeah, they were tremendously. Oh God!
Oh, the crocodiles, the flamethrowers.
Well, yes, they were brought up. I remember. But there was another type of tank that sort of breathed fire.
Yeah, it's called a crocodile, I think.
Yes,
it was.
That's right.
A flamethrower.
Yes, flamethrower. Yes.
Terrifying.
Well, it was. You know, if you were near when it was being fired, you thought, my God, I wouldn't like to be at the other end of this.
Mm. And you were a section commander then?
Yes. Looking after about 8-10 men.
Yeah.
And I always remember people were a little bit wobbly. I remember I had one man who I knew actually right earlier on before I went to the I section, and I remember his name, Private Crombie. And I remember we had to move forward, and I said to a man at the end of my section, about 8 men, I said, "Where's Crombie?" "Don't know, sir." He knew perfectly well he was somewhere. He just sort of bucketed off into the bush. You know, he wasn't going. I'm not going to have this.
So after the Reichswald Forest, where did you cross the Rhine then?
Well, I think my commanding officer, who I knew, and my brother, he knew him better than I did, he deliberately saw to it that I was sent to the reserve company, and our task, the company I was in, all our main task was carrying the storm boats, whatever they call them, the big boats, down to the actual river.
For the crossing?
On the late afternoon, just when it got dark, of 23rd of March 1945. I remember that very well, taking the boats down. I think we didn't actually put them into the water, but I remember coming back. We knew, we'd been told the outlined plan. I remember morale wasn't very high because we knew where we were, that the next operation, and probably the final, was crossing the Rhine. And it was skillfully planned, well, properly prepared. We had plenty of time to prepare it. And sure enough, the night of 23rd of March 1945, it was a very still night. It'd been a lovely spring day, and they crossed over. I remember the Highland Division. We had the Black Watch with the leading battalion in the division. They crossed at the same time as one of the English English divisions further down the river, and that went relatively well. I mean, with a few casualties, but not too many. Then, early the next morning, the 24th of March, I remember we were told this in our briefing. They said, all being well, if the weather's all right, and they've got until 4 p.m. this afternoon, that was on the 23rd of March, he said, the Airborne Division, British Airborne, 6th Airborne Division, will land in front of where you have made your landing. And that absolutely put our morale up. You know, the commanding officer went round briefing us and saying this, that, and the other. And we'll start at 23rd of March. We'll start at about 10 o'clock tonight. And when we were told about this airborne division, and sure enough, that went like clockwork. I remember early the next morning, 24th of March, they arrived on time. We couldn't see them very well. It was a lovely day, sort of a spring day. And we couldn't actually see the parachutes dropping, but they dropped in the right place. And they linked up with our main force, which had dropped the night before, in a matter of, I think, about half an hour.
And then where did you go on to?
Went on up towards the Dutch border, towards Utrecht, was it? I think. No, there was another town, I can't remember.
Bremerhaven?
No, it was quite a small place.
Well, that's in Germany, of course.
Yes. I can't remember it offhand. And I remember it very well because all the Dutch came out to welcome us and sort of saying, thank God you have come to help us liberate us. What was it?
Well, that was after that horrendous winter when so many of them died of starvation.
Oh, yes, the Dutch.
Yes.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. There had been one, had Arnhem been successful.
And so when did you went up towards the Dutch border? So you headed north.
That's right. Yes.
Northeast sort of direction.
Yes.
And did you meet? Did you have further combat on?
Very little after that. We were then, I suppose, we were actually at, must have been April 45. I'd have to look up the actual dates, because I kept a diary of all this. When word came, I think the adjutant should have told me himself of the battalion, said, "You're going down to a War Office Selection Board, make sure you pass it this time." He said, "There'll be a special vehicle for you to take you down. The driver will enjoy that." And it was quite a drive, actually, from where we were right down to Bruges. No, Ghent it was, yes. And that was it. It was, that was where, yes, I said to the commandant of the board, I said, "Look, I'm quite prepared to, I feel," I didn't say looking around like some of my platoon commanders, of which a number had been wounded during the course of the whole campaign. I said, "I feel quite capable of commanding a platoon now." He said, no, I can't, no, you wouldn't, you might get, I remember him saying, "You might get killed." You might get killed just on the eve of the war ending in Europe.
But were you sent, after your training, were you sent back to Germany?
Yeah, I was. With a short break, I was sent back to a different battalion of the Seaforth Highlanders.
To the Seaforth?
Yeah. I was in the Seaforth Highlanders.
They've got a very famous war cry, haven't they?
No, I don't think so. Caberfait is the sort of thing. It's Stag's Head. That's the statuette, that was the wedding present that my father and mother got in 1919 on their marriage.
Oh, how lovely.
And sadly, the mould got lost in the blips of the Goldsmith and Silversmiths Company at the bottom of Regent Street in 1940 or 41. Yes, I'm very fond of that. So
you went back to Germany, and it was in the last weeks of the war by then?
I went back. Yes, I did a very short time with that depot up at Elgin. And then I went back to a different battalion of the one I'd been in before.
And they were still fighting at that stage?
No, it had finished.
It had finished.
Yes, we were stationed up at in Hanover. I was rather shocked what I saw. It was one of the things actually we were rather sensible about. We didn't seem to bomb the barracks in Germany, as if we'll occupy those, which of course we did. They were jolly fine barracks too.
But what was the state of Hanover like? It was in ruins.
Hanover, yeah. I was shocked. I thought, am I back in Britain? You know, I remember walking down the main street of Hanover, and as a second lieutenant, and somebody said, "James, watch these Germans, they'll try and push you off into the pavement if you're not careful. Just go straight on." And I remember very well seeing, I couldn't believe it, my eyes, when I saw Woolworth store in Hanover, you know, labelled F.W. Woolworth, sort of bent down, sort of thing one remembers, really, that sort of thing. But
what was the condition of the town?
Condition of
the buildings.
Pretty good. Yes, quite good.
So we hadn't bombed it.
Well, we had, of course. I mean, it was indiscriminate bombing.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I always enjoy reading. I would have loved, not. I suppose if we'd asked what the greatest event would you like to see, I said, well, there are two. I'd like to see the crucifixion, and I'd like to see Montgomery handling the Germans when they surrendered on the Lunenburg Heath. I'd love to have been there.
Yes.
Where Monty gave them stick. You know, it was rather like a rerun that probably went on in 1918 a bit. You know, when
in the railway
the
carriage.
delegation came along and said, Monty said, what do you want? We want to surrender to yourselves and the Americans, with your Americans. No, said Monty, you've got to have the Russians too. We can't surrender to them. They're animals, they're heathen. This is Monty's own story. Yes.
So the nebelwerfer was used against your hoods.
Yeah.
And what was the noise?
It was rather like, oh yes, very much. You could feel it coming all the time, getting louder and louder and louder, like how do I describe it? You feel that it was being directed at you. It was like an engine, really, which it was.
And very terrifying.
You could hear it, yes, you could hear it being wound up, and then it took off, and you thought, by God, we'll give you a little time to get your head down. And of course, if you did lie flat, your chances were probably very good, really, of survival. Do you know, I remember in Normandy, just after I'd been moved to the intelligence section, the intelligence officer came along and said, Nairne, just got your shovel with you? I said, yes. He said, dig a trench for yourself, just about 100 yards up on the right-hand side, just above that track. I said, what? I did that, and the Germans must have been aiming on this track. I'd never been so frightened in all my life. They were shelling this sort of road where we were sending supplies up to forward companies. And they obviously didn't. I thought, God, they're after me. And a stonk of shells, about 2 or 3, landed literally about, this is no exaggeration, about 6 feet away from where I dug my trench. Of course, they were after the track that went behind me. I thought, God almighty, all earth ever came into my trench. We were rather one-man trenches then. I thought, God, this is it. I hope this is not going to... I thought I'd be safer here in the intelligence section than I would be with my forward company. I rather wish I was back with them.
So what did you do? Did you just keep your head down?
Keep your head down, yes. And when I got up, when they'd all finished, I got out and said, good God, it's practically on my trench, you know, nearly. Part of it actually did sort of crumble a bit.
Must have been terrifying.
Well, it was a bit, yes. One got used to it. I don't think one did get used to shell fire. You could gauge it roughly whether it was coming for you or not, or how near you. You know, you knew roughly where it was going to land. I always felt sorry for people like it happened to my brother, who was adjutant of his battalion. With your headphones on, you can't hear what the hell's going on. And these mortars, Germans were rather good with their mortars. You might, if you were lucky, hearing it, boop, and then before you knew where it was, there was a great swish, and the mortar bomb sort of right beside you practically. I remember it was his second wound he'd had one in North Africa, saying, you can't hear, I was trying to talk to the forward company, and with the headphones on, you can't hear a damn thing. What I heard was this swish. Anyway, he said that it didn't wound me too badly, but I had to be evacuated home. They were nasty things, mortars. The Germans were rather good. I don't know whether we were quite as good as that. I always found we didn't use them enough. The heavy mortars, not the 2-inch mortars, but the 3-inch mortars.
Terrifying. I'm going to record again, if you don't mind, because it's helpful for my notes. But I wanted to ask about morale, because I don't think people give...
In 1944, before Normandy, or...
Well, if we look at the training that you had before, was morale very high in your...
I would say yes, but not. I wouldn't have said it was high in the 51st Highland Division. It sounds disloyalty towards them. But they all said, well, why are we being got to do this? We knew perfectly well we were going to be used for the second front. There was I, really green about all this. And so one was looking at sort of trained soldiers. I mean, most of them had all been in the desert and the Sicily, and the division was brought home. and they knew perfectly well they were going to be used for this so-called second front. And morale wasn't very high. And as I think I told you, just as a small example, in my own battalion I was with, I couldn't believe my eyes when in our first operation in Normandy, I saw people running away, running back through us. I thought, I can't believe this. This is impossible. Then, fortunately, I remember this was in an isolated company incident by this time. A fairly newly commissioned officer grasped the nettle and said, "Come on, follow me." Literally, a sort of schoolboy story almost.
But do you think morale was low consistently afterwards, or did it improve?
Improved, particularly when these old ones who'd served in North Africa and Sicily were probably wounded, out of the way.
And what do you think were the main factors apart from that? Was it quality of supplies or?
No, I think supplies was all right. I think at the back of their minds they thought, well, why are we doing this? Look at all those people sitting at home, been at home all this time. It rather reminds me, I thought it was a lovely term called Operation, oh God, it's awful, my memory suddenly goes. I was thinking it the other day, where they had a roundup in about, not till October 44, of officers who'd never been abroad throughout the whole war, been sitting around and rather made themselves so-called indispensable in training establishments. God, it had a lovely name, something like woodpecker. It wasn't woodpecker.
Blackcock?
No. God, it's awful. I shall remember it, you see, as soon as you leave.
But they rounded them up.
Operation, yes. Barnacle. Operation Barnacle. I thought, what a splendid name. All these officers sitting around at depots and things, probably doing a good job, but they'd never heard a shot fired. And they did have a mild roundup. I remember I was at my depot in the middle of towards before Normandy, and there was already a sort of little bit of a sweep up of these people who'd been training others, and it's time they did something more active. Yes.
But the other thing I think that's interesting in your story is that it wasn't completely unusual, but it wasn't consistently the case that there would be somebody who would be, let's say, might have been expected to have been officer class, but was in a company as a section commander, as a corporal.
Quite.
And what was your relationship like with your?
With my company commander, or
no, below.
Yeah.
With your section.
Oh, very, very good. Yes. Now I've said good. Yes. I was always remember having. I started off with a section of about 8 men, I suppose, and there was one man in it who I'd known since sort of before D-Day, and I always remember his name, called Private Crombie, and he was never there. He ducked away. I remember advancing, actually in the Reichswald forest, and I had 6 or 7 men in my section, and I said to the sort of leading man, "Where the hell's Crombie?" "Don't know, sir." "Well, he must be somewhere. Go and find. We're not going on until I found him." I went back myself. He just sort of went into the bushes and hid there, so we had to go without him. I then had to put a report in about him. I don't know what happened to that man. He was, I suppose you could say, he was what they now term bomb happy, or he just couldn't take any more.
No.
A neurotic case. And I'm afraid there were quite a lot of people rather like that, but not as bad as Private Crombie, who literally dodged the column. I knew what he'd done. We were advancing in this right wall forest. He just went off to the side without telling anybody and just lay down.
But he might have had what we would now call post-traumatic stress disorder.
That's right. Funny you should say that, because I said to, in a letter thanking Sir Malcolm Pill, what is your next book? Have you thought of doing one on stress in battle? What is now, well, we would call it people who are bomb happy or shell shocked, or, well, I think they've got this place up near, I can't remember where it is, dealing with these cases of post-traumatic stress. I believe they had a bit of it in the Falklands, actually.
I think every single military campaign has had it.
Yeah.
But he was one example, but generally speaking, you were happy with the relationship you had with your company.
Oh, yes. Oh, very.
And
very
your company
so.
Commander as well.
Oh, very much so. But I always felt that my company commander didn't come right forward. He rather left that to sort of section commanders, platoon commanders. I always remember seeing, particularly in those Rhine-led battles, the company commander was always a bit behind, with perhaps quite right, with the second in command of his company, a captain, whereas the 3 platoon commanders were very much forward. Of course, one heard cases afterwards about where the company commander took the lead himself. I suppose that's natural. He would if things were going wrong.
But your diary would be interesting because it would shed, it's just I don't know what you wrote in it, but
I think I'm sorry now, I think I was probably too, I don't know whether it's lenient, probably too modest, probably wasn't sharp enough, telling about people who didn't come up to scratch. I asked my brother, Patrick, who was in another battalion of the Seaforth Highlanders and who was in Northwest Europe until he was wounded. He said, oh God, he said, I had constant trouble. Yes, he was adjutant then. He was adjutant. Oh God, some of the officers we had were just not up to it. Some of them came to me. He said, one in particular, I remember saying, I can't take this anymore. And in that case, we were able to get him a job as something like brigade transport officer. And actually, I remember that particular man because I knew him earlier on when I was just a mere private. When I was adjutant of our territorial battalion right up in Dingwall, Rossshire, almost one of the first people I saw when we assembled the pipe band was this man, Alec Niche. I didn't go up to him and say, you won't remember me. I just let it be.
Mm.
Yeah. This is Normandy. Sunday, July the 23rd, 44. In the early evening, a mortar bomb landed in the battalion headquarter area, which wounded Andrew Todd, OC Headquarter Company, Ramsay Aitken, the quartermaster, who happened to be visiting battalion headquarter at the time from B Echelon, Charles Ray, the adjutant, and CSM Johnson, the CSM of Headquarter Company. All these personalities got evacuated to the United Kingdom except Andrew Todd, who later recovered at B Echelon. CSM Johnson later joined the battalion in March 45 and became Company Sergeant Major in S Company, Support Company. The loss of these personalities was sadly felt, and it wasn't easy to find replacements. Roy Muir, A platoon commander in A Company took over the duties of adjutant a week later, and RQMS Oaks combined the duties of quartermaster and quartermaster sergeant for almost 3 months. I was glad when on a visit to B Echelon in October I found him as Lieutenant Oaks, quartermaster of the battalion. For 3 months, headquarter company was without a sergeant major, so RSM Graham and later RSM Tate had to combine their duties as well. Well, that's pretty dull stuff. Let's have a look. Sunday the 30th of July, Reveille was at 700 hours. Being a Sunday, there was a compulsory church parade. We were then resting, not far from Caen, but as my boots required immediate repairing, I got off this parade, though I'm not sure if I was sorry. At B Echelon, I went to find my kit bag. As expected, it was practically empty, except for a pair of socks, a pair of boots, and my one and only pair of shoes. The latter was the only piece of personal property which remained, though perhaps it was the most valuable. The weather remained fine. I stared honestly, and it made this week rest all the more enjoyable. Our time was left mostly to ourselves. It was usually employed by sleeping the best part of the day. In the afternoon, we all visited the Divisional Mobile Bath Unit, which was situated in the 5th Camerons area, some 6 miles away. Although these bath units were usually somewhat congested with all sorts of Highlanders, and it was often difficult to get even wet. The main advantage was that they would exchange one's dirty clothing for clean. Just a minute. Let's leave on to something operational. I went out with Daddy Adams, who was the intelligence sergeant, Frank Kidd, on a reconnaissance of our forward defended localities. We went a good deal further and reached some of the high ground where we could see the village of Tilly-la-Campagne. Our object in the battalion attack was to lay strands of white tape from the present location of our forward company to a cross-track near a railway line, some 500 yards distance. We were to carry this out shortly after 0 hour. The purpose of the white tape was to guide the jeeps back to battalion headquarters, forward company, with any casualties. On the return from our reconnaissance, we passed through all the forward companies, who had all now arisen out of their duvets and were either talking in groups, smoking, or preparing their equipment for the move forward. We passed several platoon commanders who were reading out the customary pre-battle message from the Commander-in-Chief himself to the troops. It was a beautiful sunset, and it definitely looked as if it would be a warm, fine night and another hot day tomorrow. Peace and quietness reigned, and it seemed impossible to believe that in a few hours' time everything would be an inferno. After a hot meal in the fast-falling daylight, most of us settled down for a few hours' final rest. At 22:30 hours, the noise of tanks moving up the start line on our flanks was very audible, yet we ourselves were to receive no immediate tank support. At exactly 22:30 hours, I heard a drone in the sky, very high up. The British bombers were coming. They would arrive on schedule and had not let us down. Soon the sky was a roar of aeroplanes passing overhead towards the bomb lines, and the sound of bombs exploding was deafening, even in a duvet. It must have gone on for a full 3/4 of an hour. At about midnight, Danny Adams, who was the intelligence sergeant, came and told me it was time to set off with the white tape. We timed it very well, and we reached the tail end of C Company, who were the reserve company. just as they were leaving their trenches to move forward. The artillery had opened up their barrage by this time, and looking back over one's shoulder, you would see the flashes every second from each of the hundreds of guns which was spread along the Canadian and Highland Division sectors. The whole rear areas had become illuminated with the flashes, and from an enemy's point of view, one could have thought that it would be easy to pinpoint the positions of all our guns. It remained all very much of the picture I'd seen of the opening barrage of that Alamein. So that the division kept direction down the appointed axis. Searchlights had been placed near the field gun lines, which did help a good deal to make night into day. As they were very conspicuous, they must have been very easy target for enemy artillery. The advantage they had to the forward troops, so we were told, was that they blinded the enemy completely to the wind 20 yards. I wonder about that now. This seems impossible to believe when they showed up so much of the countryside to our own troops. The three of us, Sergeant Adams, Lance Corporal Hall and myself, carried the heavy rolls of white tape and followed slowly behind C Company. The 800 yards walk to Tilly-la-Campagne down a grass track seemed to never end. I suppose we hadn't got further than 300 yards before very lights and bullets started to fly about, coming from the enemy defence force in Tilly. We kept moving on behind C Company, though there were several halts, and the pace was very, very slow when we did move. This is one of the worst, most of the frightening periods during an attack, moving slowly forward or stopping at frequent intervals without any suitable cover. I always kept my ear open on such occasions for the sound of a shell coming my way. One usually felt like running as fast as one could to one's objection and digging in quickly, rather than take the more obvious choice of doing it all systematically. The enemy in Tilly-la-Campagne, it was just an ordinary village, was definitely going to put up a resistance, in spite of what might be taking place on their flanks. Bullets were whistling about in all directions, and the enemy was sending up all sorts of weary lights afterwards, skywards. We passed the majority of C Company, who were now quite stationary, some of whom had started digging with earnest. I crawled forward on hands and knees for fear of picking up a stray bullet, and started to unroll the white tape. We had no pegs, so we had to place stones on to keep them flat and straight. It seemed to me a queer business to take backwards, and the few riflemen who saw us must have thought so too. A jeep passed slowly and silently, carrying the first wounded jock back to the Royal Regimental Aid Post, which remained... God, he put the map here. Remained at Bra, a place called Biorreas, throughout the entire operation. The taping took time, and on the way we passed numerous stragglers from the companies. Thomas Harvey, the carriers officer, who had sighted himself with some carriers halfway between Tilly-la-Campagne and Bra, rallied most of these stragglers together. All of them, without exception, had said that they had got lost. Some, however, were walking wounded, who eventually found their way back to the regimental aid post. I reached our battalion headquarters, as it now was, at about 0100 hours. I went into the command post with a notebook and pencil to record any details that might come over the wireless for information in the war diary. David Blair, who was second in command, was trying to contact CO and his tactical headquarters were somewhere in the close vicinity of the village of Tilly-la-Campagne. By wireless. It appeared that wireless communication had broken down. The signals officer, Lieutenant Gillis, was doing his best to link rear headquarters up with the forward companies. I suppose I dozed off to sleep. Anyway, when I woke, David Blair, second in command, was speaking to the brigadier over the field telephone. The wireless communication must have improved, for the news over the second command was giving did not seem too cheerful, but was supposed to be accurate. In a dreamy sort of way, I heard that 35 men had passed through the regimental aid post as casualties. A discussion was also taking place over the telephone about reinforcements from the 5th Battalion Seaforth Highlanders. I couldn't gather what it was all about, and being very tired, I went to a trench and fell asleep immediately. It was quite light when I awoke, though an early morning mist made it impossible to see further than 50 yards. Sorry, it's rather boring stuff, this.
Sorry, how many officers?
2.
And how many prisoners? Say 50 prisoners.
Oh, yes, about that, yes.
Yeah.
This must have been added much later on. 6th of August, written in 6th of August 1999. This was a crucial offensive, and it was hoped that it would help bring to an end of the Normandy campaign. 2nd Battalion Seaforth Highlanders formed part of the 152 Seaforth and Cameron Brigade and the 51st Highland Division. For this operation under the command of the 2nd Canadian Corps, whose commander, Lieutenant General Simmons, was known not only as a determined leader, but a man with imagination. It was his idea which introduced artificial moonlight to enable tanks to operate in darkness, and also to remove from tanks the gun and replace it with fully equipped infantrymen. In brief, the offensive would open with an attack by Bomber Command, followed by the customary artillery barrage. This would be followed by an advance on a 2-brigade front on each side of the main Caen-Falaise road by the so-called Kangaroos route, that is, tanks without guns who would bypass any village on the way. The task of 152 Seaforth and Cameron Brigade was to follow up behind the Kangaroos on foot and to clear the villages. The objective of 2 Seaforth was to capture the village of Tilly-la-Campagne, located about a quarter of a mile from the previous weeks the Canadian Army had tried to capture, but had failed on account of the strong resistance, and the Canadians had suffered heavy casualties. In the late afternoon of the 6th of August, the battalion moved from the village of Annecy, where it had been resting, to its concentration areas at Bras. The weather at that time very hot and remained so for the next few days. During the afternoon of Monday the 7th of August, final preparations were made for the set-piece attack. Visits were made to battalion headquarters by the brigade commander, Brigadier A.J.H. Castles, later CGS, by various gunner officers and squadron troop leaders from the RA Royal Army Corps. All looked very professional with their map boards, chronograph, pencil and field glasses. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Andrews, had gone off to rest in his sit trench, so the battalion's second in command, Major D.A. Blair, handled and controlled all these visitors. At 6 p.m. the intelligence sergeant, Sergeant Adams, and Private Kidd and myself went out on a reconnaissance as far as our forward defended localities, and we even went beyond that till we reached some high ground where we could see the village of Tilly, La Campagne. Our main task at 0 hour was to lay strands of white tape from rear battalion headquarters, which would be located at Bra, to a cross track close to a railway line, some 600 yards distance, to act as a guide for our jeep vehicles carrying any wounded back to our regimental aid post. This would be located beside rear battalion headquarters at Bra. On our return from this reconnaissance, we passed our forward companies, who had been resting most of the day in their slip trenches, and who were talking in groups, smoking, or preparing their equipment for the night attack. One platoon commander, Lieutenant Blaine, was reading out a pre-battle message from the Commander-in-Chief. Apart from this, everything was very quiet. There was a beautiful sunset, and it looked like a fine warm night, with another hot day to follow. After a hot meal in the late evening, most were settled down for a few hours' final rest. At 23:30 hours, we started to hear the noise of tanks and the kangaroos moving up upon our flanks. We ourselves received no immediate tank support. At precisely the same time, a steady stream of aircraft flying high could be distinctly heard, which got louder and louder, and very soon the sound of exploding bombs became deafening as they dropped their bombs ahead of us. This lasted for about 45 minutes. At about midnight, the intelligence sergeant and the intelligence corporal and myself moved off with our rolls of white tape. We had timed it well, and we reached the tail end of C Company, Major Gilmore, who were the reserve company, just as they were leaving their trenches to move forward. Our artillery had by this time opened their barrage, and looking back, it was a spectacular sight to see the flashes of what appeared to be hundreds of guns spread along the Canadian and 51st Highland Division sectors. We carried the heavy rolls of white tape and followed slowly behind C Company. It was not long before firing started from the German defenders in Tilly, just the village. Bullets were whistling about in all directions, and they were also putting up very lights. We moved past reserve company and started to unroll the white tape. It seemed strange to unroll the tape backwards towards rear battalion headquarters, and the few men in the rifle companies who saw us thought so too. We had no peg, so to prevent the tape blowing away, we placed stones on it at intervals. First casualties being carried in a jeep past us, and as we taped backwards we came across numerous stragglers from the rifle companies. Lieutenant Harvey, the carrier's officer of support company, had sighted himself about midway between the village of Bra and Tilly, and rallied most of these stragglers together. Some were walking wounded, but all the others said that they had got lost in the move forward. Arriving back at rear battalion headquarters in Bra at about 01:30 hours, on 8th of August I was sent into the command post and to await further orders. It appeared that there was a breakdown in wireless communications at tactical battalion headquarters, which was caused by machine gun and mortar fire, and put out of action the control wireless. The main control wireless set. As a result of all this setback, communication between tactical battalion headquarters and the forward companies and rear battalion headquarters was very limited, but contact was eventually made from tactical battalion headquarters, from brigade headquarters on the Royal Artillery representatives who sat with the commanding officer. The fighting, in spite of this, was confused, and the defenders of Tilly were putting up a very strong resistance. D Company of the 5th Battalion, Seaforth Highlanders, were ordered to give support to us, the 2nd Battalion, in the early morning. They made an attack on the village which resulted in heavy casualties, including the commander, Captain Grant Murray, who was killed. It was not until about 11 o'clock on the next day, 8th of August, resistance to Tilly came to an end, and 2 officers and 49 other ranks were captured. It was the appearance of tanks which had entered the village from the south which had put an end to the resistance by the Germans.